There are no closer allies than the U.S. and Israel, but you wouldn't know that today. The outgoing Secretary of State and Israel's Prime Minister delivered dueling speeches. Each blamed the other for the failure to reach a lasting peace in the Middle East.
Friends need to tell each other the hard truths, and friendships require mutual respect.
In an impassioned speech, Secretary Kerry defended the administration's decision not to block a United Nations resolution condemning Israel for building settlements in the occupied West Bank, a resolution that also condemns Palestinian violence.
In the end, we could not, in good conscience, protect the most extreme elements of the settler movement as it tries to destroy the two-state solution. We could not, in good conscience, turn a blind eye to Palestinian actions that fan hatred and violence.
Israel captured the West Bank in a brief war with Arab countries in 1967. For decades, it's been U.S. policy that the West Bank would eventually become part of a Palestinian state right next to Israel, the so-called two-state solution.
Despite our best efforts over the years, the two-state solution is now in serious jeopardy.
That, Kerry said, is because the Israeli government, under the leadership of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, has allowed settlement building to continue. The White House says the number of settlers in the West Bank has grown by 100,000 since the beginning of the Obama administration. Kerry made clear he gave this speech now because he fears that both Netanyahu and the incoming Trump administration could reject the two-state solution. Prime Minister Netanyahu had a blistering response.
Israelis do not need to be lectured about the importance of peace by foreign leaders.
It is not Israeli settlements that are blocking the road to peace, he said. It's the Palestinians.
How can you make peace with someone who rejects your very existence? It's a shame that Secretary Kerry does not see this simple truth.
In a statement, a top Palestinian official responded, "The minute the Israeli government agrees to cease all settlement activities, the Palestinian leadership stands ready to resume permanent status negotiations, leading to Palestine and Israel living in peace and security side by side."
Israel's now preparing itself for even more maneuvering at the United Nations against the Jewish state led by the Obama administration before ending its term in January. This as evidence of Israel's allegations that the White House actually helped to craft and push the UN's anti-settlement resolution forward may have just materialized. An Egyptian paper just published what it's claiming are the actual transcripts of meetings between U.S. Secretary of State John Kerry and senior Palestinian negotiator Saeb Erekat earlier this month. If the documents are authenticated, they confirm Jerusalem's allegations that Washington and Ramallah were conspiring against Jerusalem. Kerry is said to have told Erekat that the White House would definitely back the Palestinians at the Security Council. One Israeli official says that as it appears in the Egyptian press, the protocol tallies with what they already knew, and that this is just a tip of the iceberg of U.S.-Palestinian collusion. Israel is concerned that Kerry will push his vision of a two-state solution in his address later today, as well as at the Paris Peace Conference in January, that Israel has refused to attend. The fear is that such a framework may also be entrenched in yet another resolution the UN Security Council will try to force on the Jewish state. Other explosive allegations found in the transcripts include U.S. diplomats expressing mistrust of the Israeli Prime Minister and Donald Trump, even going so far as to call the president-elect dangerous.
President-elect Donald Trump made a brief appearance outside Mar-a-Lago just moments ago to offer his take on Secretary Kerry's Israeli policy speech.
After days of criticizing the Obama administration for turning their back on our ally Israel, the president-elect says he spoke to President Obama on the phone and they had a nice conversation, but he didn't have anything nice to say about Secretary Kerry's 70-minute-long speech about Middle East peace.
The UN has such tremendous potential, not living up to its potential. There is such tremendous potential, but it is not living up. When do you see the United Nations solving problems? They don't. They cause problems. So if it lives up to the potential, it's a great thing, and if it doesn't, it's a waste of time and money.
He has to wait another 3 weeks to take the oath of office, but the president-elect isn't waiting to do some diplomatic triage, tweeting today, quote, "We cannot continue to let Israel be treated with such total disdain and disrespect. They used to have a great friend in the U.S., but not anymore. The beginning of the end was the horrible Iran deal, and now this, UN. Stay strong, Israel. January 20th is fast approaching." That two-part tweet caught Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's attention. His official account tweeted back gratefully, quote, "President-elect Trump, thank you for your warm friendship and your clear-cut support for Israel."
The Obama administration is ramping up plans to punish Russia for interfering in the election as President-elect Trump ramps up rhetoric over what he calls roadblocks from President Obama. All this with just 23 days to go until the inauguration.
A parting shot at Putin. That's what some are calling the White House's decision to hit the Russians with a new wave of economic sanctions for cyber hacking during the run-up to the 2016 U.S. election. Sources tell Fox News that punishment could come as soon as Thursday, though some GOP lawmakers are questioning the timing of the administration's decision.
Here's what I would prefer. Let the new Congress and the new president deal with Russia, pass new sanctions much tougher than the ones we already have.
It's the latest in a series of major moves by President Obama, who's just weeks away from leaving office, but has remained aggressive during the lame duck period. From barring states from denying federal money to Planned Parenthood, to a permanent ban on energy development in parts of the Arctic and Atlantic Oceans, and scrapping a dormant registry for male immigrants from a list of largely Muslim countries. Analysts believe this is just the sort of late flurry that critics were worried about.
The only reason to destroy those regulations is to delay any effort of President Trump in carrying out his campaign promises. It's something like General Sherman burning his way through the South and leaving nothing but scorched earth in his path.
Turley further explained the new sanctions against Moscow could paint President-elect Trump into an uneasy corner. Undo the heavy-handed sanctions and be seen as Putin's puppet, or leave them in place and sting the Kremlin just when it was believed a diplomatic thaw might be in the offing. Mr. Trump has certainly noticed the president's shift in both tone and action, tweeting, "Doing my best to disregard the many inflammatory President O statements and roadblocks. Thought it was going to be a smooth transition. Not."
With respect to the transition, I think they would be the first to acknowledge that we have done everything we can to make sure that they are successful, as I promised.
A broken promise, say experts, that the president-elect ultimately will have to clean up. No surprise, Doug, the Russians wasted little time in reacting to the news of a possible new round of sanctions that could be headed their way. The Kremlin saying simply they would retaliate against Washington, with a foreign ministry spokeswoman saying this whole episode has been orchestrated by the White House, calling it a provocation directed from the very top.
We begin with the situation in Syria as Russia and Turkey discuss a nationwide truce plan for the war-torn country. Although Turkish state media says a deal has been reached, none of the key players in the conflict have offered a confirmation. The state-run Anadolu news agency said a plan aims to expand a ceasefire in Aleppo city to the whole country. It was brokered earlier this month by Turkey and Russia to allow the evacuation of civilians. If the deal goes through, this would form the basis of upcoming political negotiations between the Syrian government and the opposition. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan made no reference to the plan, while the Kremlin said they did not have enough information.
Iraqi security forces are advancing in Mosul and could defeat ISIS in the country within 3 months, according to Prime Minister Haider al-Abadi. His comments came as Iraqi forces prepare for the next phase of military operations in Mosul. Since October, a coalition of Iraqi-led forces, including the Iraqi Army, counter-terrorism forces, federal police, Kurdish Peshmerga fighters, and Shiite-led paramilitary forces have tried to end ISIS's brutal rule in Mosul. The battle started as a rapid push into the city, but transformed into a block-by-block war, with ISIS now inflicting high-casualty raids on advancing Iraqis. According to security officials, the Islamic State is using civilians as human shields to slow down Iraqi troop advances.
2 men have been arrested in Madrid on suspicion of spreading Islamist militant propaganda. Spanish police released video footage that showed officers raiding a building in the outskirts of the capital and finding gun magazines and ammunition. It said the search uncovered 4 Kalashnikov magazines and over 30 bullets.
Iranian armed forces continue with their large-scale air defense drills on the country's southern city of Bushehr. The maneuvers entered their third and last stage on Wednesday with the successful test firing of mid-range and long-range missiles. The domestically developed Mersad air defense system was employed to fire Shalamche mid-range missiles for the first time since the Iran-Iraq war, while Ofoq airborne fire control radar directed the operation in Khark Island. Later in the day, Khatam al-Anbiya air defense base successfully tested Talash missile defense system, as well as a modified version of the long-range surface-to-air S-200 missile.
North Korean leader Kim Jong-un is going into 2017 with 2 things that look ominous for the rest of the world. He's tested a nuclear weapon, and no one knows how willing he would be to use one in anger. North Korea conducted 2 nuclear tests in 2016, including its most powerful one ever in September. According to the Kim regime, that test put North Korea's nuclear program in its strongest position ever. State media said the test enabled the country to produce a variety of smaller, lighter, and diversified nuclear warheads of higher strike power. Western experts fear that could expand the range of North Korea's nuclear weapons, possibly putting Alaska, Hawaii, or even the U.S. mainland in danger.
Strong earthquakes struck both sides of the Pacific Ocean today. First, a large swarm rattled the California-Nevada border, followed by an intense rattler near Fukushima, Japan. The quakes come just days after a 7.6 magnitude hit southern Chile.
Over here, there were 2 5.7 magnitude quakes just after midnight in Hawthorne, Nevada, which is right along the California-Nevada border. Now, this happened in an area that is not very populated, but people were feeling the shaking all the way in San Francisco, as well as in the Central Valley of California, and in Reno and South Lake Tahoe. Now, this was followed by 100 aftershocks, a little bit more than 100 actually as of now, and people were really worried about it.
Floods caused by torrential rain in Bolivia have killed at least 8 people. The National Weather Service has issued a high-level alert for heavy rain in 5 areas in the west of the country, including the administrative capital, La Paz. The downpour comes on the back of the country's worst drought in 25 years.
Adelaide has been battered by ferocious winds and lashed with unseasonal downpours, the wild weather leaving behind a trail of destruction. In Glenelg, the roof was torn from an oval grandstand and a car was impaled by a wooden post picked up by a powerful gust.
The roof's come off the grandstand at the Glenelg Footy Club and hit my car, basically. So, yeah, and I've got a beam hanging out the rear window.
Extreme conditions kept SES volunteers under the pump. They've responded to more than 1,000 calls for help so far, and that number is only rising. That makes this their busiest year on record. Tens and thousands of South Australians have woken up to a second day without power. A massive storm caused severe damage to the network on Wednesday morning, uprooting trees onto power lines right around the state. Last night, around 80,000 properties were still blacked out, but by morning, crews from SA Power Networks were able to reconnect about 50,000, and that number is steadily increasing. It's not just homes that have been affected. Shops were also left in the dark, with frustrated business owners forced to shut down and throw out tens and thousands of dollars worth of produce yet again. The cleanup continues today, with many roads and homes still littered with branches and other debris created by chaotic winds.
The stormy weather in Israel this past week wreaked havoc to both the present and the past. In the Tel Dan Nature Reserve near the Lebanese border, the rain collapsed a First Temple period wall. The immense amount of rainfall made the soil expand behind a section of the stone wall, and eventually the wall collapsed. Archaeologists hope to restore the wall made of original and reconstructed stones within a few months. Tel Dan is identified as the ancient city of Laish, inhabited by the tribe of Dan after they migrated from the coast due to the constant attacks by the Philistines. In other weather-related news, the Golan Heights received more snow than usual, and an Israel flight from Eilat was hit by lightning and forced to make an emergency landing in the resort city. There were no injuries reported.
The drought tore through much of East and Southern Africa. In Somalia's semi-autonomous regions of Somaliland and Puntland, it led to the death of livestock, a lifeline for pastoralists.
I am 8 years old, and in my 8 years of life, this is the first time I've seen a drought this bad. It has killed so many animals and caused so much hunger. Our lives are in danger.
In Zimbabwe, the dry weather destroyed crops and decimated livestock. In Bulilima district, in the country's Matembele Land South province, the elderly were forced to take care of their grandchildren. Many parents left their children to search for work in neighboring countries.
Mom went to South Africa to look for work. She has not sent anything back since she left. She phoned twice to say she has not yet found work.
In Malawi, about 2.8 million people were at risk of hunger after floods and drought hit the staple maize crop, reversing gains made in reducing rates of malnutrition over the past 2 decades. In Beloha, Madagascar, residents struggle with the country's 3rd consecutive year of drought. Many were forced to dig out riverbeds in search of water. In Ethiopia, 10 million people were affected in the worst drought seen in the country in 50 years. Humanitarian agencies called for more donor support to help address a relief supply gap. Many people in the country are still small-scale farmers and herders who depend on seasonal rains for crops and animals.
3 new cases of bird flu have been reported at poultry farms in western and southern Poland. The H5N8 strain of avian flu is not considered harmful to humans, but has been spreading across farms in Europe. France, Germany, Bulgaria, and Greece are among the countries to have reported outbreaks in recent weeks.
Egypt has a drug problem, a shortage of medicine caused by the falling value of its currency, making some patients uncertain about the future.
I'm afraid of being rejected as a patient in the dialysis center, since they said it will be closed soon. And when I went to Matareya Hospital, they said they are suffering from a lack of filters, and the hospital will only receive emergencies.
Pharmaceutical companies in Egypt depend on imports of raw materials for almost 60% of production. The fall in value of the Egyptian pound makes buying ingredients more expensive, and there are price caps too, so many products are now unprofitable to produce or import.
We are suffering from a shortage of medicine in the kidney unit and in the whole hospital generally. And recently we have been forced to pay roughly twice as much on the black market due to the lack of supply through the normal channels.
The central bank's devaluation of the Egyptian pound against the dollar and the pound's plunge to the dollar caused severe losses to both medicine importers and manufacturers.
Yo, what the fuck? No, hombre. Son como meteoros.
Como meteoritos son. Sí.
Is there a chair in there?
You'd think Eduardo Diaz was getting a brand new Ferrari.
Oh my God.
For years, he struggled with a makeshift lift.
I have fallen because you're trying to work with one hand while trying to keep balance with the other.
Those days are now behind him.
It's hard.
Because he wants to be tough.
Not to let the emotion
of getting a gift from strangers
swell up and take over.
So he fought back tears.
Although it's there. This did not come out of a sales room.
It came from the Walker family. They worked with the VFW post in Alpine to give him the van. It comes free of charge since he already paid a price when shrapnel struck his leg in Vietnam. Whee! Test driving the wheelchair had him acting like a kid again.
He's got this so he's more mobile.
God, that's great.
And can get around more.
It brought tears to Dennis Walker's eyes because it was his dad's van. He too was a disabled veteran and recently passed away.
They put their lives on the line and they serve the country, so that's what we wanted to do.
This came from the deep inner parts of someone's heart, from the hearts of my fellow, veterans.
It means he doesn't have to ask for help, and while it's not new with a big bow, it doesn't need one.
It comes wrapped, in a big ribbon of independence.
Hannah Mullins, 10 News.
This is 10-year-old Austin Decker. He's battling a severe heart condition, and he's a huge Auburn football fan. His elementary teacher posted this pic of Austin saying his prognosis isn't good and that his Christmas wish was to meet Auburn legend Cam Newton.
How you doing? You doing all right? What's up? You doing good? I feel your heart, man. Sort of.
Such a cool moment. Cam Newton surprising Austin right there. According to reports, Austin is going to have a procedure later on today, and we are, of course, all pulling for him.
Oh my God, that breaks your heart.
That's just amazing. Wow, what a picture.
Yeah.
Really good to see that. Can we go back to Ohio State Clemson?